Abdul-Baha, Glimpses of Perfection. Calling the entire human race to unity and peace, Baha'u'llah, the prophet and founder of the Baha'i faith, proclaimed to the world during the last century that he was the promised one, awaited by the followers of all religions. He appointed his eldest son, Abdul-Baha, as the center of his covenant with all mankind. Baha'u'llah chose this eldest son to be the sole interpreter of his words and the perfect exemplar of his teachings.
Banished from his native land of Persia with his father at the age of 8, Abdul-Baha suffered 56 years of persecution and imprisonment. He accompanied Baha'u'llah in exile, first to Baghdad, then to Constantinople and Adrianople, and finally to the city of Akka, the most great prison. Entering this prison in 1868 as a young man of 26, Abdul-Baha was not to be freed until 1908 at the age of 64. Soon after his release, Abdul-Baha set out for America to proclaim the message of Baha'u'llah and to lay a solid foundation for the faith in the Western Hemisphere. He embarked from Egypt on the steamship Cedric, which stopped in Europe before proceeding to New York.
Some American Baha'is sent Abdul-Baha a large sum of money, urging him to sail to the United States from London on the maiden voyage of the Titanic. Abdul-Baha, however, refused to accept any money and returned all that was sent, directing that it be used for charity. He continued his journey to America on the Cedric. The Titanic struck an iceberg a few days after Abdul-Baha arrived in New York and sank at sea.
Abdul-Baha arrived in New York on April 11, 1912, and began travels through the United States and Canada that were to last 9 months. Broken in health by 56 years of exile and imprisonment, having received no formal education in his life, speaking only a few words of English, and being wholly unfamiliar with Western customs, claiming only a handful of followers in North America, and having given his first public talk at the age of 67, Abdul-Baha yet raised his voice from pulpits and platforms to thousands of eager souls in the leading cities of America, proclaiming the message of Baha'u'llah.
His words caught the attention and touched the hearts of all who listened. Abdul-Baha's activities during his stay were many and varied. He deepened the believers in small groups and visited their homes and spoke at large banquets. While in Chicago, he visited Lincoln Park Zoo with a group of the Friends. And in New Jersey, he was invited to the home of the Persian Consul General.
He received wide newspaper publicity. Many articles referred to Abdul-Baha as a prophet. Once he explained to the reporters that he was not a prophet, but a servant of the servants of God. There were, of course, reception lines where hundreds of seeking souls, Baha'i and not, met and shook hands with their master. He welcomed all with love and strength, seeing each one not only as he was, but also as he could be, and drawing out from each more than what was there before. Abdul-Baha picked out of the crowd individuals who later rendered great service to the cause of God. spent a week at Greenacre Institute, which was later to become the first Baha'i summer school in America. It had been established in 1895 by Miss Sarah Farmer as a center for unity and fellowship between races and religions. 6 years later, she turned the school over to the Baha'is in the face of fierce opposition from her family. Abdul-Baha took Sarah Farmer for an automobile ride while visiting the school and gave her a bouquet of flowers. Before descending from the car, he kissed her on the cheek.
Louis G. Gregory, who later became the first Negro hand of the cause, had been on pilgrimage and had met Abdul-Baha in Egypt, where he was then residing before his visit to America. A devoted English Baha'i had been in Egypt at the same time. Her name was Louisa Matthew. Both Louisa and Louis saw the master again in New York, where he suggested, much to their surprise, that they should be married. They obeyed his wishes, and Abdul-Baha married them in New York shortly thereafter. Louis Gregory later traveled all over the United States, especially in the southern states, teaching the Baha'i faith. He also served for many years as a member of the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States and Canada. Howard Colby Ives, a Christian minister, spent some time with Abdul-Baha while he was in the United States and later became an outstanding Baha'i teacher. He has left us a vivid description of his first meeting with the master in a crowded New York hotel suite.
His eyes met mine as my fascinated glance was on him. He smiled and beckoned me. As I approached the door where still he stood, he motioned others away and stretched his hand to me. He drew me in and closed the door. My throat swelled. My eyes filled. At last, he looked right into me. It was the first time that this had happened. He looked at me. It seemed as though never before had anyone really seen me. I felt a sense of gladness that I, at last, was at home, and that one who knew me utterly, my father, in truth, was alone with me. He wiped the tears from my face, admonishing me not to cry, that one must always be happy. And he laughed. He kissed me on both cheeks, laid his arm across my shoulders, and led me to the door. That is all. But life has never been quite the same since.
Abdul-Baha loved children very much. He was often photographed with them during his stay in the United States.
Juliet Thompson was a devoted Baha'i who followed Abdul-Baha everywhere while he was in New York. She was an artist, and the master granted her permission to paint his portrait. During the forced sitting for this painting, only she and Lua Getzinger were present with Abdul-Baha. Juliet later wrote in her diary,
"Suddenly, with a great flash like lightning, he opened his eyes, and the room seemed to rock like a ship in a storm, with the power released. Then he spoke to Lua.
I appoint you, Lua, the herald of the covenant, and I am the covenant. appointed by Baha'u'llah. Go forth and proclaim, this is the covenant of God in your midst.
Oh, recreate me, Lua cried. Juliet Thompson is shown here standing behind May Maxwell. Juliet and Lua often broke into tears in the presence of Abdul-Baha, overwhelmed by emotion. On one such occasion, Juliet wrote, he laughed and remarked to her,
your eyes and Lua's are two rivers of tears. The lives of many other Baha'is were touched and transformed by Abdul-Baha during his 9 months in America. The stories of these meetings would fill many volumes. Among those who met him were Sutherland Maxwell and his wife, May Maxwell, who received Abdul-Baha in their home in Montreal, where he stayed for 4 days, and their daughter, Mary Maxwell, who later became the wife of his grandson.
Fred Mortison, a young ex-convict, fearing that Abdul-Baha would not visit the western states, rode the rods on freight trains from Minneapolis to Green Acre in order to meet him.
The home of the socially elite Kinney family became a center of Baha'i activity in New York during Abdul-Baha's stay there. It was a cold and windy day when the friends gathered near the shore of Lake Michigan in Wilmette, Illinois. They had come to dedicate the land on which the first Baha'i house of worship in the Western world was to be built.
A large number of friends gathered and followed behind him. Abdul-Baha walked to the center of the tent and, pacing back and forth, spoke of the significance of the future house of worship.
Abdul-Baha called for an axe and shovel. Spadefuls of earth were turned by representatives of many races, nations, and kindreds.
Abdul-Baha gave handfuls of earth to some of those present as mementos of the occasion. Finally, he finished the work on behalf of all the people of the world by placing the cornerstone. Then he said,
the temple is already built.
A few days later, while still in Chicago, Abdul-Baha spoke in 2 Christian churches on the same day. In the All Souls Church, he revealed a prayer for all mankind.
O thou kind Lord, unite all. Let the religions agree and make the nations one, so that they may be as one kind and as children of the same fatherland.
Almost 2 months later, Abdul-Baha personally planned and hosted a unity feast held in West Englewood, New Jersey. About 300 were present. In a spirit of fellowship and joy, Abdul-Baha welcomed his guests with his happy smile and loving words. Everyone at the feast was transformed and filled with love by the presence of the Master. All seemed to vie with one another to please him. Abdul-Baha said,
this is a delightful gathering. You have come here with sincere intentions, and the purpose of all present is the attainment of the virtues of God. The desire of all is unity and agreement. Such gatherings as this have no equal or likeness in the world of mankind, where people are drawn together by physical motives or material interests. Rejoice, for the angels of heaven are your assistants and helpers. Rejoice, for Baha'u'llah is your protector. Rejoice, for the glory everlasting is destined for you. a woman whose close friend had attended a meeting in New York where Abdul-Baha spoke, remarked to a Baha'i,
"He must be a very wonderful man."
She tried to tell me about him and could hardly speak for tears. I said to her, "Why, my dear? What was there so wonderful about this man?" All she could say was,
"Oh, you should have seen him. You should have seen him."
"My name is Abdul-Baha," the master wrote. "My qualification is Abdul-Baha. My reality is Abdul-Baha. My praise is Abdul-Baha. Thraldom to the blessed perfection is my glorious and refulgent diadem, and servitude to all the human race my perpetual religion. No name, no title, no mention, no commendation have I, nor will ever have, except Abdul-Baha. This is my longing. This is my greatest yearning. This is my eternal life. This is my everlasting glory."
In the last years of his earthly life, the Master wrote these words to the Baha'is in America:
"Friends, the time is coming when I shall be no longer with you. I have done all that could be done. I have served the cause of Baha'u'llah to the utmost of my ability. Oh, how I long to see the loved ones taking upon themselves the responsibilities of the cause. Ah me, I am waiting to hear the joyful tidings